Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. My name is Tom Dolan, CEO of the Babylon Industrial Development Agency, and I welcome you all for a riveting discussion about economic inclusion and how IDAs can develop more equitable and sustainable communities. We have a lot to get to and some great speakers for today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping things to go over before getting into the program. With Zoom, as an audience member, you can change your screen layout to either gallery or speaker view based on your preference. You can submit questions to the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to use the chat function to interact with your fellow audience members, but please submit any questions to the Q&A button so our moderator can easily see them and bring them to the panelists' attention, time permitting. Before we get into today's program, I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce today's keynote speaker. Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hokel has been a lifelong advocate for women and working families across the state and fighting for equal rights and opportunities for success. She has worked at all levels of government, from town board to Congress, where she represented New York's 26th congressional district. Lieutenant Governor Hokel chairs the statewide regional economic development councils, which have reinvented economic development in local communities. She has also spearheaded the state's comprehensive paid family leave program and is continuing to work to eliminate the gender wage gap. Please help me in welcoming our Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hokel. Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to participate. First of all, Tom, to you and everyone at the Babylon IDA, when I was a town board member, I spent 14 years as the town's liaison to our IDA. So I was in there literally rolling up my sleeves and working to do whatever we could to help assist businesses prosper in my community. So I know exactly the work you do and how important it is. I also want to thank Rich Schaefer for the work he does in Babylon, incredible job as well. And to City and State for co-hosting this. We have our moderator, Zach Williams. So thank you for all of you done. I won't go through all of our great panelists who I'm friends with just about all of them and consider them great partners in government, but I know because we have a tight timetable, but you have the dream team of all stars that I couldn't have put together better myself. You know, today is really about writing our comeback story. And when you think about it, we're really the authors of that story. We're literally sitting, I was going to say with a pen, but more likely at a keypad, writing that first chapter. And there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't really know how it's going to end, but we know how it's beginning. And we know that if we have an intentional approach to a strategy that will lead us to inclusive economic recoveries, then we'll know we're on the right page. And so our objective, first of all, at the outset, is just to agree that there is no robust recovery that's worth anything if we don't have it be very inclusive, to make sure that people who've been marginalized or those who were hardest hit during the pandemic really get an opportunity to succeed in this post-pandemic world. And we want to make sure we don't end up with the what happened after the last pandemic. You think about the Roaring *20s, but think about the books that were written at that time, The Great Gatsby, that highlighted the incredible income disparity that occurred after the last pandemic and the so-called Roaring '20s. And we certainly don't want to end up writing a book like The Grapes of Wrath, where there was widespread depression and poverty. So with those as sort of the story we don't want to tell, we are writing our story right now. And that's our challenge. You know, at the one end, we're very excited to be celebrating the end of the long darkness that we had to endure together as a state and as well as a nation. But while we're having those festivities, enjoying seeing each other again and getting back to work, we also have to make sure that we don't forget the fact that there's been a lot of destruction from this storm. It's already there. There's a lot of main streets that are just not the same as they were before the pandemic. I know because I've walked in them. I was in Westbury recently. I've been walking many of the communities and just trying to, you know, connect with the business owners and say, what's your problem? What's happening? Some are never going to open again. That's tragic. I think we should be reaching out to those owners and finding ways to see if they can, with state and local government assistance, come back to life, because their loss diminishes all of us, but also those are just hanging on by a thread, what we could be doing there. So you're going to be hearing from Jerome in a few minutes about all the programs we have through the small business efforts. We have our MWE program, which nothing like it in the rest of the country. We're very proud of that. But I wanted to say that, you know, we're used to dealing with adversity. We're used to comebacks. unfortunately, we've had a lot of experience with this, but resiliency is in our DNA, whether it's after Sandy, after 9/11, or even a place like Long Island, how we had to reimagine the future after Northrop Grumman left. Everyone thought that their jobs would be there forever. Similar to me when Bethlehem Steel left my hometown in Buffalo, and my grandpa's job and all my uncle's jobs, and everybody left for good. So we've been down before, but we're not out. And that's something I want to remind everyone, is that we approach this with a positive attitude about seizing these opportunities and having partners in government and academia and the private sector all coming together with a common vision, similar to what the undertaking we did when we first started the Regional Economic Development Councils. And I know Tracy has been very involved. Ryan was involved in helping start that. Overall as a strategy from the state. But when we sat down together and decided what our strengths are, what communities need to be lifted up, what's the future going to look like, we came up with a really cohesive plan that has still endured after a decade. So that's what we're talking about, is right now coming up with that storyline, and that's what we want to do. But I also say, we need to be really, really focused on an inclusive recovery. And what does that mean? It means lifting up people who even before the pandemic were in a bad place, not sharing in the good jobs that are out there, the good paying jobs, and living the American dream. And I'm talking about a lot of women who primarily, low wage jobs are occupied by women. And the sad news is after this pandemic, we now have 1.8 million fewer women in the workplace. Why is that? Well, a lot of their jobs were the jobs in the hospitality, restaurants, hotels, cleaning services, the minimum wage jobs that just may never come back. They may have been automated out of existence when you order your dinner out on iPad in a restaurant and don't talk to a wait staff anymore. Or you're talking about people who couldn't come back to work because of childcare, and I'll get to that in a couple minutes. But I think the overall objective of this conversation, I hope, will lead us to conclusions and recommendations on how we ensure women, people of color, people with disabilities, veterans, and those who've been recently incarcerated, all of them have a pipeline to sustainable careers. And we also have to respond to the challenges that the businesses are facing. We need to meet the demand that they have to have people skilled in specific careers, whether it's technology, whether it's advanced manufacturing, the trades. I mean, so much building is going on, but we need more people, particularly women and people of color, in the trades, and what we're doing to ensure that. And we've identified these key pillars, and also life sciences and biomedicine as key pillars for the Long Island economy. But I will say, as someone who's walked in more factory floors and down more main streets than anybody probably in the history of this state, I can tell you right now, I'm not seeing the diversity, and I'm not seeing enough women in these high-paying good jobs of the future, particularly the clean energy jobs. Clean energy is what the future of Long Island is going to be based on. We've already introduced offshore wind training. Building these turbines will be the first step, but also re-engineering our whole grid. A lot of opportunities, but I'm not seeing people in training programs and on the places already with the jobs that look like the communities that we're trying to address here. So we need to align industry and government and make sure that we have a pipeline to get them into the training that's out there. Also, this is going to lift up people from marginalized communities into sustainable jobs where they can be financially independent, something everyone craves, but they don't always know what door to open. They don't know what forms to fill out. They may not know that there's a training program down the block from them. And also just addressing the fact that we don't have enough childcare is going to continue to be a barrier for us. So what I'm going to continue to do and have been doing is staying closely in touch with all the business associations, Long Island Association, the Nassau and Suffolk Chambers, and industry leaders. As I did throughout the pandemic, we convened a lot of forums and a lot of Zoom calls to talk about the very desperate needs they had at the outset, then the reopening and the frustration not knowing all the rules of the road at the time, but now we're at a far better place. So I understand their barriers and their challenges, but I also want to know that we have our partners in the local government, the IDAs, who can work with us to structure incentives, state and local incentives, to get businesses to buy into this idea that they can be better, more profitable with a more diverse workforce. It lifts up the individuals who have the jobs, but it also addresses the labor shortage. So how do we make sure that everyone are reaping the benefits of this? You know, I just spoke to the Long Island, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the honored Latinas, and it was so hard to hear the stories of women who built their whole lives around a certain job, a little shop they started, a bakery, a small business, and they're just been really hit harder than most. So I want to make sure that we're having direct relationships with the associations that represent these individuals as well, to make sure that they're at the table when these decisions are made. I love the priorities that the Babylon IDA has identified, you know, boosting small businesses, helping storefront redevelopment, and also continuing to study, you know, the demographics of what's changing. And I will say that programs like our Downtown Revitalization Initiative, 4 winners so far in Long Island, 1 in Westbury, and others in Suffolk, Islip and others, they're all doing very well with this infusion of $10 million. But how do we help communities, perhaps the smaller or harder hit communities where they don't have the resources to even apply for this? That's something we need to overcome. So you're going to hear more about the small businesses, but I will say that I'm familiar with the challenges of small businesses because I've helped start small businesses. My sister and my mother were involved in a tech business and a small flower shop. So I know how hard it is. I also know that we can do a lot better in terms of creating opportunities for them. And I'm proud that the state of New York has $800 million available, a small business recovery program. But the question is, we know about this, people on this call know this, do the mom and pop businesses, or mostly the mom businesses, do they know about this? Is this information getting down to them? Are they getting help from government to fill out the forms? Because as I know from helping small businesses, you have one proprietor run a shop, you know, 9 to 5 every day. They go home and they work on their family issues or inventory for the next day. When do they have time to apply for these programs? Let's be sensitive to that issue as well and make sure that we're providing literally technological skills, tech skills, and opportunities to pair people up with these businesses to help them get their share of this money. We have over 330,000 small and micro businesses eligible for this, and that's 57% of our MWBs, but we have to do more hand holding. So you're going to also hear from some of our other partners about how we're going to do workforce training. We committed $175 million to workforce training a few years back. We are rolling out those programs, but I want to make sure that we are addressing the pockets of people who will benefit the most from this, the ones who don't have a family member who's an engineer or a professional who can lead them down that path. What about the people who've never been exposed to these opportunities? So let's focus on bringing back our downtowns, helping our small businesses, and continuing to make sure that we're lifting up everyone. I think there's a real problem now with vacant spaces in our downtowns as well. And I think the IDAs have a key role to play in identifying businesses who can fill that space. And I offer to help with you at the state level, because we're invested literally not just in what's going on across in Albany, but also what's happening on main streets throughout Long Island and the rest of the state. So the last thing I want to address in a big way is childcare, because this was the common complaint I heard, not just from women who lost their jobs because they couldn't find someone to take care of their children who might have otherwise been in school, or children who would have gone to a childcare center that's now shuttered or had to lose a lot of its capacity. I heard this challenge from business owners, and I was delighted to hear it from a lot of male CEOs who realized all of a sudden, like, oh, they can't staff this business, or they can't get people at this factory, they can't get people in this business park if they're focused on trying to get their women employees back and there's no one watching their kids. So we need to focus on making sure that we address this, treat it as seriously as we should have all along, but I'm afraid there wasn't enough commitment, in my opinion. I think there is now, but it's not just a problem to be solved by state and local governments. We need businesses, when they come before an IDA or they come before the REDC looking for assistance, we should be asking, saying, okay, we'll help you out. We'll use taxpayer dollars to assist you, but you need to help us by addressing the childcare crisis. And tell us ways that you can use your current workspace to literally build an on-site center. If you're expanding, you can add more square footage. You can have a consortium with local businesses and make this available. You can do this countless ways. And having more flexible hours, for example, for your employees may allow them to be able to continue working. So this isn't just for the family. This is to help the labor shortage crisis, which is literally on steroids right now. And we need to make sure we solve this. And I think one of the keys is to address who's watching the children. Yesterday, we announced $25 million to help in childcare scholarships for our essential workers. So we're doing our part. More money is coming from the federal government. But literally, this is something that I think every IDA and every entity that deals with businesses and connecting people to these jobs will realize that this is one of the big barriers. Also, we have to make sure that women and people of color and people in these disadvantaged communities have access to the job training that's out there, and not just be building apprenticeship programs and workforce development programs in neighborhoods that we're not trying to help, that the ones that are doing well, the ones that don't need that. I was just visiting a facility on the east side of Buffalo, a hard-hit community. A couple of days ago, we've invested a tremendous amount of money in workforce development programs where people literally don't have to take multiple forms of transportation to get there. They can walk down the street. They can take a short bus ride. That's what it's all about. Bringing these talents and these opportunities and these apprenticeship programs and training programs right to the neighborhoods. And that's what we need to continue doing. So we're going to focus on the labor shortage. We're going to focus on childcare. We're going to focus on small businesses, making sure that they have the resources to stay alive, and also get more young people excited about these jobs. Are we doing enough to go into the schools in these neighborhoods and talk about jobs in the green economy, how exciting that could be for them to be a part of that? We need to be more intentional in those objectives. So lastly, how we'll write back New York's comeback story, it's up to all of us. I'm excited to be part of this effort. And are we going to focus on building a new economy where everyone feels that they're part of this? And we can succeed. We can be more competitive, not just with other states, but internationally. And we can also reduce income inequality, which is one of my prime objectives. So let's write the storyline that'll not be reflective of what happened after the last pandemic 100 years ago, where we had great income disparity and a lot of poverty. Let's write that storyline so the 20s do come roaring back, but not just for a few, but for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Hokel. We really appreciate you being here with us today, and we want to thank you for your continued leadership and on all these topics that are so important to everyone. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Tom.
You know, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the economic inequities in communities of color, emphasizing persistent gaps in healthcare, employment, and education. In Suffolk County, the town of Babylon is proud of the leadership it has exhibited on this important topic through its Economic Inclusion Initiative, an innovative program providing financial, technical, and legal assistance to the minority, women, and veteran entrepreneurs within the town. In less than a year, the Babylon IDA saw 3 programs come to life under the umbrella of our overall Economic Inclusion Initiative. In partnership with AT&T and the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, we launched the START program, which established a resource center that provides free training and other technical assistance opportunities, such as becoming NWBE certified to aspiring entrepreneurs. We also created the Storefront Development Program, which aims to improve occupancy rates in underutilized business districts while providing small business owners with affordable space needed to take their business to the next level. Last, but certainly not least, is the completion of the socioeconomic survey of Black and Brown millennials, which provided us with the invaluable insight into the continued struggle these segments of the population face in our region. Today's discussion serves to inspire us all how to leverage this local momentum and develop programs that could benefit communities throughout New York State and beyond. At the conclusion of this panel discussion, I hope we can collectively have answered 3 important questions. How can the programs that exist today become better and wider utilized? What other types of programs and resources can be made available with the goal of a more inclusive economy? and what avenues can be explored to improve funding availability for the continued creation and success of these programs. We are very excited for today's conversation that features an esteemed panel of experts. Joining us today is Dan Lloyd, President and founder of Minority Millennials, Jerome Duval, Executive Vice President and Executive Director of the Division of Minority and Women's Business Development, Assemblywoman Rodnise Bichat-Hermelin, who is also the chair of the Assembly Committee on Oversight of Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprises, Ryan Silva, Executive Director of the New York State Economic Development Council, and Tracy Edwards, Long Island Regional Director of the NAACP New York State Conference. I'd also like to introduce and thank Zach Williams, Albany reporter for City and State New York, who will be serving as the moderator for today's program. And with that said, I'll let Zach take it over from here.
Thanks so much, Tom. What a great introduction and another superstar speech by the Lieutenant Governor. I think we're really going to be able to build on these really great topics that they teed up for us. We got a murderer's row of experts on IDAs and MWBE and all types of government alphabet soup. But I do want to just, it can get so complicated with industrial development agencies and these issues they tackle. So it'd be great if just everyone that's on the panel can introduce themselves a little bit and just kind of explain how they fit into this space. And of course, audience members, feel free to drop a question in the Q&A function, probably at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to work them into the conversation as we go. So maybe we could start off with one of our really distinguished panelists here, Jerome Duval. Could you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and explain how you fit into these broader issues of IDAs and promoting equitable and sustainable communities?
Thank you, Zach. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be an exciting opportunity for us to share some of the innovative programming that is happening and how you can get involved. As Zach stated, my name is Jerome Duval, and my focus is real simple. My job and mission is to certify qualified MWBEs. And how we do that is by removing barriers to contracting opportunities within New York State. So Zach, we certify businesses that are qualified that meet the 15A criteria, and I'll be looking forward to talking more about what that means. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Did somebody say MWBE? Because we have a member of the Assembly here, who I think has worked with that topic a little bit more than just a little. Assembly member Rodnise Bichat-Hermelin, introduce yourself a little bit and explain what you've been doing on this issue.
Thank you so much, Zach. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, City and State. Thank you, the Babylon IDA and everybody who's on here. My name is Assembly Member Rodnise Bichat-Hermelin, and I am the Assembly Member representing Central Flatbush. I also have plenty of other hats, but I am the chair of the subcommittee for MWBE in the state of New York. And I certainly want to acknowledge our great panelists and our guest speaker, Kathy Hokel, Tom Dolan, Dan Lloyd, Ryan Silva, Tracy Edwards, Jerome Duval, who I'm working with very closely on MWBE, and Zach, thank you so much for being a moderator. How I fit here, and to Jerome's point, Mr. Duval's point, my mission is to write legislation that will break the economic barriers that many of the minority and women business enterprise has faced for a very long time. And over the past few years, under my leadership, we have done so. And I hope that the IDAs across the state recognize what we're doing and implement some of the programs and policies that we've been pushing through our legislation. I just want to point out a few things. Under my leadership, under the legislation that we wrote, we were able to expand the Article 15A for an extra 5 years. And it also increased the discretionary threshold to 500,000. In many cases, it was 200,000. So again, that affords MWBEs a level of capital access without having to compete. We also increased the personal net worth to 15 million. We had issues where we had a number of minority and women-owned firms who were doing well. They were mid-sized, small to mid-sized, who had a personal net worth of more than 3.5 million, who could not participate in the program. So that was an issue. We also did legislation around workforce. I know the Lieutenant Governor talked about workforce training. We actually, after doing the disparity study, we implemented one of the recommendations, which says the construction field should hire 30% minority women members, because that is the first step of building your businesses. When you have those expertise, you become that entrepreneur, that expert to build their business. We've also worked with building programs, mentorship programs. We created a pilot program with DASNY where it was a total of $20 million. And again, it would invite MWBEs to participate and do business with DASNY. So across the state and across the city of New York, and again, we have also increased the discretionary threshold, build a mentorship program with the design department and construction. We've done a lot across the state, and we would like to see the IDAs, Babylon IDA, really take advantage of what we're doing, and certainly setting those policies that are in line with the legislation. So I look forward to that.
Thanks so much. Some that our MC and our Lieutenant Governor were just talking about is just how much need is out there. And I can't think of a organization that probably has a more of an ear to the ground than the NAACP, New York State Conference. And luckily we have a very distinguished person who is actually part of that organization. Tracy Edwards, could you explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm really grateful to be here. Under the leadership of our great president, Hazel Dukes, we have a economic development chair, Gary Johnson, who really, what we're seeing across the country is really what we're seeing in New York and especially Long Island. As the pandemic pointed out, where minorities were disproportionately impacted, minority businesses were also disproportionately impacted. And we were already behind in some cases. So we need the initiatives that the Assembly member just pointed out and Lieutenant Hokel spelled out for MWBE and veteran initiatives. We need intentional approaches like the Babylon IDA is doing, and banks, quite frankly, that need to be a little bit more flexible so that you don't have to have capital in order to get capital. So we're all aligned on what the issues are, and we are also aligned on what we need. We need that financial economic education so that people know where the money is available, and more importantly, how can they qualify? We specifically need individual and community asset building initiatives so that we can build wealth. We need those diversity and inclusion in business hiring and renewable energy and manufacturing. We need to ensure that recovery efforts mean that we can go further than we were before because we were already behind. There are some small businesses that are prospering, but they are prospering because their competitors have folded up because they couldn't survive through the pandemic. That's not how we want to grow. And specifically in the MWBE space, once we get certified, we need to ensure that we have access, we have opportunity, that we're looking into those RFPs that are there, because we can qualify for segments of the job, but if they are bidding the whole job, we're still blocked out. So we need all of these leaders that are working really hard on there to continue to do all of this good work and look at the individual piece parts. And I'm just thankful that the Babylon IDA understands that there needs to be targeted approaches specifically for minority and women-owned businesses as we come out of this pandemic.
Thanks so much. And, some that I hear about childcare and these millennials that I'm a part of, this big generation that's coming up that are now in their, late or 20s, 30s, 40s, they got needs too. And I think there's been a lot of emphasis on, bottom up economic development. And I think somebody that may too has their ear to the ground is Dan Lloyd over here. Can you explain a little bit about what you've been up to in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Zach. And I just want to say good morning and thank you to the Babylon IDA and as well as City and State for hosting this vital conversation and including minority millennials in this dialogue. It's an honor to join all the regional leaders in this conversation today. As Zach mentioned, my name is Dan Lloyd. I'm the founder and president of Minority Millennials. Our organization was founded in 2017 as a tool just to bridge the gap between policy and culture. We have recognized that on Long Island and across the world, the minority is becoming the new majority. The rapid growth of the minority population on Long Island is showing no signs of slowing down. However, minority populations are still underrepresented and underfunded. So our mission as an organization is to help young people of color access jobs, build wealth, and become civically engaged. We strongly believe all Long Islanders deserve access to good paying jobs, truly affordable housing, because at times, as everyone knows, Long Island, affordable housing is not truly affordable, and economic opportunity through transparent and community-led development. Our motto is proof and progress. We want to make sure that in 5 years, the inequities and the disparities that we see, not only from the COVID-19 pandemic, but from the decades before this, and in 5 years, those gaps have been closed. And this is why we advocate for leaders to expand their perspectives and fully understand both the internal and external forces that shape communities of color. And as you mentioned, Zach, millennials are actually getting, on the older end, as far as some millennials are actually now 39 years old, and there's still a lack of understanding and just knowledge about the mindset and the process of how millennials work. And as we all know, Gen Z is coming up quick, and they're holding no bars as to what they believe in as far as economic inclusion. And a great example of leaders taking the leadership with regards to economic inclusion is with the Babylon IDA and the CEO, Tom Dolan, that we've had the honor to work hand in hand with in the past 9 months, just to get a better understanding of the socioeconomic needs of Black and Brown millennials, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later on with our survey and the results, and to ensure that the playing field is level for all residents on Long Island and across the region, regardless of their skin color. So I'm actually very optimistic about what economic inclusion looks like moving forward because of the amount of success that has happened out of this program in the past 9 months. And I'm also very excited and looking forward to the rest of this conversation. So thank you for including us today.
So we got Dan, our designated millennial ambassador. We got an assembly member. We have a representative from the NAACP, New York State Conference, and a representative of ESD. And I think batting at number 5, we got Ryan Silva, who I think knows a thing or two about how we bring together all these different interests to get projects going, to actually foster the development itself and make sure everyone's included. Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Zach. Thank you to City and State for hosting this conversation today. To our friends, our colleagues at the Babylon IDA, Tom and Dan, thank you for your leadership on this critically important topic, but also for setting a benchmark. To Assembly Member Bashat, to Jerome and Tracy, thank you for your leadership and the opportunity to speak with all of you here today. As Zach said, my name is Ryan Silva. I serve as Executive Director of the New York State Economic Development Council. We are a membership association of local economic development organizations from across New York State. We have over 900 members, and our focus is on advocacy, education, and policy development. As the Lieutenant Governor mentioned earlier, I had the honor and privilege of also serving as Deputy Director of the Regional Economic Development Council several years ago, earlier in my career. So really have an understanding of how ESD can work with local economic developers, how we can identify and utilize the assets and strengths of our respective communities to solve the critical challenges. And right now, I think is really an inflection point for all of us in the economic development world to sort of rewrite and redefine what economic development is and what economic development means. For so many years, we've looked at economic development through the lens of jobs created, jobs retained, and tax dollars spent to help do that. And as we're learning, economic development is so much broader, so much larger. It's about equity and inclusion. It's about increasing salaries and wages and access to these different types of emerging jobs that are going to be the future of our economy. It's about downtown revitalization. It's about providing resources to Main Street. It's workforce development. It's infrastructure. There are so many different ways to quantify and show economic value. Dan mentioned a little bit about housing. Access to affordable housing is a unique challenge all across New York State right now, particularly on Long Island as well as in New York City. So how do we as IDAs leverage the tools and resources we have to play an important and critical role in our recovery efforts? IDAs, I can give a little background, just what they are and how they function, because you hear the term industrial development agency, you likely think of old school manufacturing, assembly lines, and it's so much different now today than when this statute was originally created in the late 60s, early 70s. IDAs are public authorities. They were created in general municipal law with the goal of identifying ways to provide economic development tools and resources at the local level. Those tools included bond financing or providing civic facility bond access to build hospitals, schools, any sort of municipal entities that are needed in a community. But they also provide payment in lieu of taxes to private companies to help attract or retain jobs. They provide a sales and mortgage recording tax exemption for companies that are starting up, expanding, relocating in New York State. And thanks to the legislature in 2020, and thank you to the assembly member who helped support this initiative, IDAs can provide loans and grants for pandemic recovery efforts. It was a new piece of legislation that was passed in 2020. And the focus of that was on distressed communities, small businesses, to help survive during the pandemic, particularly those businesses that did not have access to PPP. So IDAs play a unique role. They serve as a leader in many communities. They serve as a facilitator. And the Babylon IDA has really created a good template for us to take and share with our members across New York State.
Took it right out of my mouth, Ryan. What are IDAs? They're not so well known to the public, I would guess. But industrial development agencies, they can really do a lot and having a real effect on people. You were just talking about loans that they could give. Who wants to jump in at this point and really explain, when it comes to equity, how do you foster economic development that not only incorporates entities like MWBE, but also helps, real people out there that, need so much help during after COVID-19? Who wants to jump in?
Well, I'll actually just jump in because this is something that we did, worked with firsthand with the Babylon IDA during the pandemic. As minority millennials, there was a number of young people of color that were impacted by the pandemic because a lot of young people were working in the healthcare industries or the service sectors, and as well with gig workers. And we're not able to, we're unemployed or laid off, and we're not able to access a lot of the resources that were available. And also a lot of young people of color are aspiring or were existing entrepreneurs that are sole entrepreneurs, and we're not able to get access to PPP loans. And so when we talk about equity, the Lieutenant Governor mentioned being able to make sure that the information and the access to loans or lending is getting down to the businesses and the small entrepreneurs that really need it most. And that's what the IDA did with this economic inclusion program. That there was a technical assistance piece to this, that we were able to make sure that those that were looking for support and quite frankly, just hope, really just being able to navigate this land that nobody really understood how to navigate, in partnership with the Hofstra University's EAC program, that was able to also retrain moving forward, because everyone had to pivot regardless of what their business was. What does social media marketing look like now post COVID-19? And so with the Babylon IDA and this program was able to foot the bill for a lot of these workshops, and also establish bi-weekly peer-to-peer mentoring sessions where those that were looking to either scale their business or figure out how to navigate were able to talk to other peer businesses that were doing this successfully. Also with the Babylon IDA, there's already an established a cohort of industry leaders in manufacturing or developers. And we were able to peer a lot of these aspiring entrepreneurs with these leaders to get better mentoring services as far as what's the next step to move forward. So I would just say with regards to equity and young people of color, is really being that conduit between access to information and as well as understanding the socioeconomic needs for Black and Brown millennials. And that's one of the things we did with the survey, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a few.
And Zach, I just want to add, Dan and I give you just a little bit of a clear example of some of the issues. There are a lot of small businesses who invest everything into their businesses. But what ended up happening is that they didn't qualify for some of the loans because they didn't establish themselves as an employee. So they put everything back into the business. So that's the type of technical and financial assistance that all small businesses need to know, that you need to create the paperwork, pay yourself as an employee so that you can show that you are an established business, as opposed to in reinvesting all of your money back into the business. That blocked a lot of people out in order to qualify for some of the loans that were out there. So that's a small example which we really have to fix and ensure that our outcome is what we intended it to be.
That was really well put, Tracy. The rules have to be there for a reason. If you don't have the rules, in many ways, you can't help MWBE, right? But at the same time, how flexible might they need to be, either through the legislative process or maybe the regulatory process. I think we got two members of the panel who really know quite a bit about one or the other and both. Jerome or Assembly Member, whoever wants to jump in, could you explain a little bit about how best that right balance can be struck moving forward?
Absolutely. This is Jerome Duvall with ESD. I think when you talk about the requirements and process for becoming an MWBE, there's a couple things you should keep in mind. One is, when we think about innovating forward, one of the tools that we just released within my first 100 days of being in this role is called the MWBE assessment tool. This is the first of its kind. Not only is New York leading the nation in terms of utilization, we're also starting to lead the nation around innovation and creating tools that empower businesses with helping to demystify the certification process. Because one of the things we all know is that when you start the process, there's a lot of things you learn about your business that you may not have thought about before. And so I think when Tracy talked about the need for building capacity within your business and how to structure that business, that is one of the unique assets of going through the certification process, right? Because we educate you, we talk about those requirements in a way that helps you identify things about your business that today you may not be thinking about. You know, when we think about how this self-assessment tool, I think is going to be a game changer for our MWBEs. You know, people think that because I'm a woman and I'm a minority, that I should be certified. That is the beginning steps towards certification. You also must think about ownership, operation, and control. You know, we talk a lot about small businesses, but what does that mean to be a small business? In the MWBE space, that means that your firm cannot exceed 300 employees, full-time and part-time equivalent. You know, independence, active in business for 1 year. You know, all of these are the steps toward becoming a certified MWBE. And so I'm really excited. I'm going to punt it over to Assembly Member Rashad because I know she has, you know, she is one of the thought leaders and has helped guide us to where we are today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duvall. I think you pretty much have said it all. But just to add on to what Mr. Duvall said, first of all, the MWBE policies and implementation will be instrumental in addressing economic recovery and setting realistic goals, and we have to do that. The state will be very vigilant in terms of making sure that those goals are met. And Jerome's crew is working very hard, making sure that we have a certification process that is seamless and very successful. As we address economic equity, diversity, inclusion, I always think of the 3 C's. Okay, I have a business background as well, an MBAer, and so we always have these little abbreviations, and we have 3 C's: the certification, capacity, and capital. And those are the 3 key things that we should really consider in involving MWBE policies and implementation. Certification is typically the starting point, okay, for any of these small minority businesses to even be recognized or even considered when it comes to doing with government contracting. And that's an area that we need a very big effort. It's been, we've had some challenges because we need more funding to hire resources and so forth. And the turnaround time for getting a lot of these minority and women business owners certified, we're working with ways, working with ESD and ensuring that we partner. And IDA can be a partner, okay? Across the city of New York, we have a whole bunch of different nonprofits and business organizations, business incubators that are partnering and making sure that they help certify these businesses. So certification is huge, okay? Once you're certified, you're on a list, and then the agencies, IBA can then point out, hey, who could we partner with? Also, when we talk about the 3 C's, we talk about capacity. As mentioned during the last session, we were working to expand the provisions of Article 15A to increase the discretionary threshold now from 500,000 to 1 million. And that's very important because, again, the participation of the levels of MWBE would increase substantially. It would give a direct economic impact, which will offer a capacity to hire people and to do the work, to do larger projects. And also it will be a tool that will help break down the barriers that a lot of the MWBEs face when they are facing competitive bidding. So really increasing that discretionary purchase threshold is key. Creating more mentorship programs also will help with capacity. As I mentioned, I think IDA should find a way to have some mentorship programs where they kind of match the minority businesses with some of the larger businesses, and they do contracts to do together, subcontracts together. A great model is the School Construction Authority, the MTA, Metropolitan Transit Authority, and now DDC. So, and DASNY. So we have some mentorship programs in place that we can certainly capitalize on. Minority business enterprise typically experience higher interest rates, more than and more loan denials, and many Black owners are afraid to even apply. So the issue of capital access has been a great burden, as you heard from Ms. Edwards about the pandemic. Minority businesses were hit the hardest, and when it came to the PPP loans, okay, or the PPP funds, they were not being approved by the banks. The banks were turning their back, to the point that we had to turn around, call Congress, and Congress had to create a separate funds for these small businesses and minority businesses. The alternative financial institutions had come into play big time. So capital access is huge. And again, if IDA can find a way, to partner with the local banks, the local alternative institutions, to be some type of maybe a financial or fiduciary type of mediator, that would be great. It plays a big role. Now, workforce is huge. As I mentioned, from the disparity study, we are trying to make sure that any type of construction working opportunities, they hire 30% minority and women. Again, that is the first step for having a lot of minority and women start their businesses once they become expertise. And the last thing I would like to say is that we need to have more conversations about this. Last week, not last week, a few weeks ago, we passed a legislation that created a construction advisory council. And that will be the first time it brings legislators, regulators, construction contractors, subcontractors, labor, and other stakeholders to address the many challenges in public contracting process in New York. And many of these who are facing these challenges, again, are minority women business enterprise. So again, IDAs would have can play a big role in this committee, because we're hoping that what comes out of the committee are recommendations that can then turn into legislation. So these are some of the things I think would be very helpful, and if the IDAs would implement.
So time flies when you're having fun, and we're running out of time, but we still got a little bit more. I'm going to try to jam as much as we can. You mentioned the 3 C's: certification, capacity, capital. Dan, could you tell me a little bit about this minority millennial survey, and one big takeaway about these 3 C's: certification, capacity, capital?
Absolutely. I just think, real quick, it's important to know that this study was the first of its kind exclusively dedicated to Black and Brown millennials on Long Island. And the purpose of the survey was, again, to better understand the socioeconomic fabric and needs of the Black and Brown millennials in this region. And one of the big takeaways was that Black and Brown millennials are highly educated, with 1/3 of the 207 respondents with master's or higher degrees, but making between $20,000 and $40,000 annually. And we all know that's just almost impossible to have a great quality of life on Long Island. And so with regards to capacity, but also just the 3 C's, I would just kind of turn that into what workforce development looks like, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, and being able to get more access to funding to implement these programs at a much earlier stage, so that we can have the proper skills for 9th and 10th graders, specifically in majority minority communities, so they can be prepared to be able to access higher incomes in these burgeoning industries like the offshore wind industry and the green economy. And then as far as entrepreneurship, so a number of the respondents are aspiring entrepreneurs. And so how can we make sure that as the IDA function, you're partnering with the community groups like the NAACP and Minority Millennials to have early education as to what an MWBE certification and that journey looks like, what bonding looks like, and so that you can have the proper protocols in place to ensure that you have the ability to, not only go and get a contract, but then, be able to make sure that that contract is providing economic development within your community. And the last thing I would just say is that there was resources and opportunities are two major hurdles. And so with this type of survey and economic inclusion program, the Babylon IDA is removing those hurdles, but this program needs funding. So as far as what policies that a statewide initiative can put into place is really, quite honestly, more funding into what IDAs can do and expand their scope of services so that this authority can implement their decades of experience with manufacturers and implement that into young people of color and those that are looking to get more equity in NWBEs, and as well as providing affordable housing as well. That's the last part I'll say.
Thanks so much, Dan. And I want all of our audience members of the panel to just really think while I ask my last question, one big takeaway for all the audience, because I would love to go around one last time before we run out of time. But Ryan, I need your help. Everyone's talking about Babylon. What the heck is going on with the IDA down there? What are they doing well? And how could that possibly be replicated throughout the state as fast as you can explain in a minute or 90 seconds?
Sure, I will do my absolute best, Zach. There are 108 IDAs in New York State. So each county has an IDA. There's 8 on Long Island. There's municipal IDAs, City of Albany, City of Syracuse, Town of Islip. And so one of the strengths and the challenges that IDAs face is one and the same, is that they're local. You're run and administered by people in the community that you serve. So while the challenges of each community are often the same, how you sort of solve those challenges may vary a little bit depending upon the partners you have within your community. So sometimes it's very challenging to create sort of this statewide model. What our role as an association to do, and I haven't told Dan and Tom this yet, but I'm inviting them to our annual meeting to present a case study on this project to the other IDAs across New York State on here's what they did, and provide forums for these IDAs across New York State to learn from each other. That's one of our critical functions. How do we provide best practices and case studies? Because there are other good things that are happening. In Erie County, for example, they did a loan and grant program. 68% of the loans and grants they provided went to MWBEs during the pandemic. The Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative, $17 million, over 60% of that funding went to MWBEs. So there are great examples. And I think what we as individual IDAs need to do, because many of these are small entities, they have 3-4 employees max, we don't have the resources that ESD or DASNY does, is to tell their story more effectively. And I agree with Dan, and I look forward to working with the assembly member and our partners at ESD, is how do we help modernize and evolve the tools that IDAs have so that they can play a more critical and effective role in addressing some of the concerns around equity and inclusion.
So we're just about out of time. This is what I call the one sentence challenge. We're going to give everyone a chance to speak, but you got to limit it to one sentence, no matter how many columns or semicolons allowed. But do keep in mind the time. Jerome, what's one big takeaway for our audience?
I want to talk about access to capital, one of the C's Assembly member Bashat talked about. And I want to talk about the New York State COVID-19 pandemic small business recovery program. And this program is now available. It doesn't matter at what point you enter into the program. It really just matters about your qualifications. And so the grant is flexible. It can be used for different needs. such as payroll, rent, mortgages, taxes, utilities, all of the things that we know that small businesses can benefit from. The governor has set a very bold goal, 30%. Last year we hit 3.1 billion. That is real money to real people, right? And so our MWBEs are in the forefront of the work that we are doing, and we're excited to continue that work. And I encourage you to go to our website to access the application. These are grant dollars. They're not loans, right? These are grant dollars available to MWBEs and other small business and veteran-owned businesses. I encourage you to apply and apply today. Thank you.
A beautiful sentence. Dan, what do you have?
Yeah,
one big takeaway in one sentence.
one sentence, well, proof of progress. We cannot have these conversations in the next 5 years. This has been decades of inequities within the Long Island region in New York. But everyone here on this panel and a number of people are working together to make sure that we have proof of progress. Long Island, New York, everyone loves this region. And if we want things to stay, the quality of life to stay the same, things are going to have to change. So we have to ensure that there's proof of progress and ensure that the metrics and the evidence of the initiatives that we're putting in place on the regional level and on the local level is actually putting solutions into those that have been impacted most by inequities. So proof of progress.
Thank you. Tracy, what's the bottom line?
I would just challenge all of us to do a couple of things. One, if there are 108 IDAs, we need 108 economic inclusion plans throughout New York. We need to focus on providing capital to those businesses and not requiring them to have capital in order to apply. We need to look at the utilization plans and the good faith efforts that people are putting in to try to avoid making sure that MWBEs have that opportunity. And we need to continue this dialogue throughout New York.
Thanks so much. Assembly member?
I'll be quick. Economic equity, economic diversity, and economic inclusion. We do this. We did it with our legislation. Now let's implement.
All right. And Ryan, in a handful of words, what you got?
Absolutely. I'm going to borrow my own 3 C's from the assembly member. And whether you're in Buffalo, Binghamton, Babylon, Brooklyn, or the Bronx, which is where my mother is from, communicate, open dialogue, collaborate, work with partners where it makes sense, and where it's important, complement. Don't try to duplicate existing resources and services. Complement what already exists and help facilitate access to those programs that exist.
Well, there you have it, everyone. A murderer's row of expertise on IDAs, MWB, and so much more. Thank you so much to our panelists. It was a really great discussion.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this vital discussion on IDAs and MWBEs. We hope you all enjoyed the discussion and learned something new from our panelists and keynote remarks. We want to thank our moderator, Zach Williams from City and State New York, as well as our Lieutenant Governor for joining us, and to all the panelists for taking the time this morning to be on this webinar. Once again, I would like to thank our sponsor, ZE Creative Communications, on behalf of the Babylon Industrial Development Agency, especially Greg Gordon, who is the Director of Public Relations. Thank you all again and hope to see you all in person soon. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.